Happy Monday, fellas. Book author and dating coach AlanRogerCurrie coming at you with a brief video. And then, after the YouTube portion is over, I am going to transition into, on special requests, I had a Patreon subscriber request a Patreon exclusive video where I primarily talk about not just typical dating and relationships advice, but more personal to do with me, major challenges I faced in my life, not only just exclusively related to dealing with women, but just in life general, and unexpected episodes of adversity I've overcome. Challenges I've had and unexpected episodes of adversity, how I overcame them. He said he wanted some that could be related to, specifically dating and relationships, but others just to do with life in general. So my first installment of that Patreon exclusive feature will be today. I'm going to do 5 episodes. Each episode will be approximately 25 to 30 minutes. The first episode is going to cover my life from the time I was a small toddler, like say kindergarten or maybe pre-kindergarten, up until I was 12 years old. That's going to be episode number 1, which is today. I'm going to upload that today. That's going to cover my life from the time I was a toddler up until the time I was 12 years old. Episode 2 is going to cover my life from the age of 13 through the age of 24, which was, as you know, a significant period because that's when I first developed my Mode 1 philosophy, was during that period. Third episode is going to cover my life from age 25 to 37. 25 to 37. Fourth episode is going to cover my life from 38 until 49. 38 until 40. That's probably going to, I'm a pre-warning you, that's probably going to be a very emotional episode. There's a 50% chance of great I'll probably end up breaking down and crying. I'm not going to even lie. Because between age 38 and 49, I lost my father during that period. I lost my mother during that period. I almost died in a fire during that period. Yeah, there's a lot of emotionally intense things that happened during that period. So that's going to be episode 4. And then episode 5 is going to cover my entire 50s, starting with my 50th birthday up until now. Everything started with my 50th birthday up until now. I'm going to cover in episode number 5. So yeah, I'm going to have 5 episodes. Now, the catch is it's only going to be available to my $20 and $50 Patreon subscribers. So I know my $5 subscribers are going to be disappointed. My $10 subscribers are going to be hella disappointed. But yeah, I'm only going to be making this 5-part series available to my $20 subscribers and up. $20 subscribers and up. So if you're a $5 or $10 subscriber, you won't be able to see it unless you temporarily upgrade to $20 and then go back down to $5 or $10, after the series is over. Next thing. As you know, I uploaded another infamous short on Friday. Only this time my shorts usually involve me talking on the short. On this short, it was Myron Gaines of Fresh and Fit fame. And there's a couple things interesting related to that. To give you the backstory on that, it started with Friday morning. I had a handful of my followers write me and say, hey man, Alan, I don't know if you know, but Myron Gaines was recently using your term manipulative time waster and your philosophy of no free attention. But honestly, I don't remember him really giving you a shout out. He didn't really give you any proper credit attribution. And I was like, okay, so I wrote Myron on Friday morning and asked him, I said, I heard you use some of my material. Did you give me a shout out? And he said, well, Walter, who's known as Fresh, he said, Walter and I have given you credit on a number of our live streams over the last 8-9 months. So if your followers told you that we've never given you credit, they're lying. He said, we've given you credit. We don't give you credit, on a week-to-week basis. But he said, we've definitely given you credit from time to time over the last 8-9 months. And I was like, okay. And then he actually wrote me this morning and basically sent me a message through Instagram saying he was going to do a better job of giving me, my due credit and proper credit attribution. And I told him I appreciated that. So here's the thing. Number one, some of my followers were writing me and wanted me to do a video going in on Myron Gaines. Basically wanted me to, badmouth him, disparage him. No. I don't have anything against Myron Gaines on a personal level. Myron Gaines interviewed me on August 31st of 2020, and we had a great interview. He was very respectful to me. He gave me a lot of, kudos, showed me a lot of love, kudos, and respect during that interview. So, again, on a personal level, I don't have anything against Myron. Now, there's some things he says, him and Walter say on their live stream that I don't philosophically agree with. So I'm always express my philosophical disagreements with people. But there's a difference. I've always said there's a difference between philosophical disagreements and personal beef that's full of personal animosity towards someone. I don't have any personal animosity towards him or Walter, aka Fresh. I really don't. Philosophical disagreements, yes. Personal, no. It's just like Rollo. I'll say the same thing generally about Rollo. I don't hate Rollo Tomasi as a human being, as an individual, but I have a boatload of philosophical disagreements with him. And there's a number of other people that would fall in that category. So anyway, I just want to make sure I don't anticipate me doing any videos going in on Fresh and Fit or Myron Gaines individually, because in my interactions with him, he's always been respectful towards me. Now, I think everybody knows I was disappointed when him and Walter canceled their interview with me that was supposed to take place on Wednesday, August 31st of this year. Mainly because they had said that they wanted to give me my due credit and my flowers while I'm still alive. And I'm always open to that. And then, the story, they changed their mind later on. I don't hate him for that. I did a whole video basically saying that, but it was disappointing. I mean, if they wanted to just interview me to talk about the contents of one or more of my books, then it wouldn't have been no big deal. But when somebody invites me to do an interview saying, we want to give you your flowers and give you your due respect, your love, kudos, and due respect, and then they change their mind on that, yeah, that's, if nothing else, it's disappointing. But, such is life. But anyway, like I said, Myron wrote me this morning via Instagram. He said, him and Walter were going to make a concerted effort to give me more due credit, due respect, and proper credit attribution. So I'm going to take him on his word, and we'll see what happens. And speaking of that, one more thing before I move on, though. I mentioned this, I think, once before. I primarily do videos on YouTube, here on YouTube. But I know a lot of other content creators, they do videos on Instagram, TikTok, I think maybe even Twitch, and one or two other platforms. The one that my wife at first told me about, a couple years ago, I never used to be in a TikTok at all. Like, I never got on TikTok. My wife is a big fan of TikTok. She watches TikTok videos like almost religiously. And she has suggested that I do some videos for TikTok. I think the limit on TikTok is 3 minutes. And you know my long-winded ass. I rarely do videos 3 minutes or less. But here's what I'm going to say, the comparison between the three platforms. I don't focus everything on views, although I do like, of course, for my videos to have as many views as they possibly can. Man, TikTok accumulates views very quick. When I put that video of Myron talking about manipulative time wasters and my no free attention philosophy, man, I'll say within less than 3 hours, I had over 10,000 views on TikTok. I ain't never had no 10,000 views in less than 3 hours on YouTube, ever, I don't think. Yeah, man, in less than 3 hours, I had over 10,000 views on TikTok. I can see why a lot of people like TikTok. Second quickest was actually Instagram. I would say in less than 4 hours, I had over 3,000 views on Instagram for that same video. YouTube was the slowest in terms of accumulating views for that short. It was a 59-second short. Yeah, the slowest was YouTube. I think now I have over 6,000 views on YouTube, but it's been slow and gradual. Like, I would say that's true with most of my videos. My views on YouTube, generally, there's exceptions, but generally they tend to be slow and gradual. Like, it'll usually take me a minimum of 2 or 3 days to accumulate over 10,000 views for a video on YouTube. But yeah, TikTok, man, this is the second or third time I've uploaded a video on TikTok where my views went real quick. Yeah. If you upload a video to TikTok that, resonates with people, you will accumulate a lot of views in an extremely short period of time. But again, to catch on TikTok, you can't upload a video that's more than 3 minutes. All your videos have to be 3 minutes or less. And I don't have too many videos that are 3 minutes or less. I'm just too much of a long-winded older fella for that. But anyway, here's what I want to talk about. I want to say this is my second time talking about this subject. Somebody wrote me and said, "Hey, Alan, I just got finished with your audiobook, The Beta Male Revolution." He said, "Man, I really enjoyed it." And he said, "I noticed you put a lot of emphasis on the changes in dating rituals between roughly 1960 and the mid-70s. 1960 and the mid-70s. And he said, but I only feel like you just briefly touched on factors that affected the dating scene between, say, the mid-90s and late 2000s, early 2010. He said, you touched on a few things, but you didn't go into as much detail, I felt. And so he asked, he said, do you feel like there was just as many impactful changes, say starting with the mid-90s over the next 15, 20 years as there were between, say, 1960 over the next 15, 20 years? So I'm just going to briefly, nothing too lengthy, but I'm going to briefly touch on some of the most impactful factors that contributed to changes in the dating scene between two periods. First period I'm examining is the period between roughly 1955 and 1974. 1955 and 1974. Then the second period I'm examining is that period between 1996 and 2015. 1996 and 2015. So, Let me start with that period between 1955 and 1974. What are the top 5 factors that I feel affected change in many of the dating rituals between men and women during that time frame, 1955 to 1974? Number 1, I would say, was the introduction of the birth control pill and society encouraging more men to use condoms. Yeah, I would say that's arguably the first big one. Is the introduction of birth control pill in 1960, and even slightly before 1960, society encouraging more heterosexual men to use condoms. Among other things, what did that open the door for? That opened the door for more men and women to engage in more premarital sex, and even more specifically, more non-relationship sex. Without getting too lengthy, too detailed, too academic, see, before the 1960s, and definitely before the 1950s, premarital sex and casual sex was heavily, heavily frowned on. I'm not saying nobody was indulgent in premarital sex and casual sex, but they did it very discreetly. Nobody was really open about that, particularly if you were from a middle class or upper middle class family. If you were from a middle class or upper middle class family, that was heavily frowned on. I talk about that in the beta male revolution. But yeah, once you had on the female end the birth control pill, and on the male end, men start using more and more condoms, then that's when people start feeling more comfortable engaging in premarital sex and casual sex. Yes, indeed. Second most thing, women, because of the second wave of feminism, women gain more opportunities to become financially self-sufficient. That's a huge one. Again, I talk about that in the beta male revolution. Yeah, that's a big one. See, there was a time when the vast majority of women had to depend on getting married in order to be financially taken care of. And that's why most fathers who had daughters wanted their daughters to get married as quickly as possible, as early as, say, the age of 18, 19, 20. Because if you were a father of a daughter and no man proposed marriage to your daughter, that usually meant you were going to have to take care of your daughter financially for a number of years. And most fathers didn't want to do that. They wanted their husband to take care of their daughters. But yeah, starting with the early to mid 60s, that's when things began to change. Technically changed before the 1960s, but I would say at the latest, in the early to mid 60s, more and more women start going to work and having full-time jobs, particularly as teachers. A lot of women became two jobs off the top of my head that a lot of women began working is as teachers and secretaries / administrative assistants. Oh, and nurses. That would be my top 3. Teachers, secretaries / administrative assistants, and nurses. That was probably three of the most popular careers that women began to take on starting with the mid to late 60s. I would say technically even before that, but definitely by the early to mid 60s. So yeah, that was a big major one. Third thing related to the birth control pill and condoms, society in general gave women more of a green light to engage in both premarital sex and non-relationship sex. And along with that, abortion was legalized in 1974. Yeah. The stigma. See, again, man, before the 1960s and definitely before the 1950s, if you were a woman and it was known that you were engaging in premarital sex and casual sex, you and your whole family were going to be shamed. Again, particularly if you came from a middle class or upper middle class background. your reputation was going to be trashed. Plain and simple. Your reputation was going to be trashed. In worst case scenario, you were going to be deemed as an unmarriageable slut. An unmarriageable slut. And beginning in the 1960s, man, partly because of the free love movement, otherwise known as the sexual revolution, the delineation between good girls and sluts started off here and went like down to here. The gap between those two shrunk. And most people in society became just more accepting of women engaging in sex. Number one, outside the context of marriage. And number two, even outside the context of a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship, which is otherwise known as casual sex. So yeah, that was huge, man. That changed dating rituals. Again, I'm not going to rehash my whole entire Beta Male Revolution book, but I talk about that in Beta Male Revolution. In simple terms, as I just said, here was how that third bullet point affected everything. It caused the delineation between good girls and sluts to shrink. But on the flip side, it caused the delineation between womanizing alpha males and monogamy-oriented beta males to increase. Yeah, with women, the delineation shrunk. On the male end, it increased. In real simple terms, man, men who were womanizing alpha males start becoming more appealing to women than, say, the early part of the 20th century. Yeah, by the late 60s, early 70s, if you were a womanizing alpha male, many women found you appealing for casual sex. They might not find you appealing for to be their boyfriend or their, it's just like related to that video I did just a couple weeks ago about clarifying the difference between alpha males and beta males. Yeah, starting with the mid to late 60s and early 70s, basically a lot of women started having a minimum of two types of guys they were interested in. There were some guys they would be only interested in having like a one-night stand or weekend fling with, or some other form of non-monogamous sex. That was your womanizing alpha males. And then there was other guys that they wanted as a financially generous and monogamy-oriented boyfriend or a husband. That was your beta males. And like I said, man, the delineation between those two grew, starting with the mid-60s. And that changed dating rituals big time. That still affects the dating scene to this day. So, yeah. Fourth, gay and bisexual men and lesbian and bisexual women slowly began to come out of the closet. Yeah. That's when you first start having a lot of gays and lesbians and bisexuals coming out the closet. Was it starting with the mid to late 60s and beyond? Because before, just about all gay men, lesbian women, and men and women who were bisexual, they kept that to themselves in a very confidential and discreet manner. But yeah, starting with no later than the mid 60s, a lot of gays start slowly but surely coming out the closet. Particularly if they, knew it had no ability to affect their job. Like if they were a writer, actor, or actress, or something of that nature. And finally, nude girly magazines such as Hustler, Penthouse, and Playboy, and movie theater pornography was introduced in a major way. Yeah, starting with the early 70s, that's when you started seeing pornographic movies in what's known as adult movie theaters. Movie theaters. That had never happened before. And people started indulging in like orgies and a swinging lifestyle because of the birth control pill and condoms. And here's what I would arguably say. I believe that period between roughly 1965 and 1985 was probably the most open-minded, free-spirited and sexually liberated 20-year period, either worldwide or at minimum here in the United States, than any other 20-year period in the last 150 years. Real talk. Yeah. I would say over the last 100 to 150 years, either worldwide or at minimum here in the United States, I would say that period between roughly 1965 and 1985 was probably the most open-minded, free-spirited, and sexually liberated period in this nation's history, man. Everybody was fucking during that period, man. In a casual way. When it came to people indulging in various forms of non-monogamous sex, that was probably the most wide open period over the last 100 to 150 years, man. Yeah, it was between 1965 and 1985. Before 1965, a lot of things were very conservative when it came to non-monogamous sex. Society was ultra prudish and conservative when it came to indulging in non-monogamous sex. And after 1985, you start having a rise in sexually transmitted diseases such as herpes, HIV/AIDS. You start having women accusing men of sexual harassment and date rape and that type of thing. And yeah, it's like now society is almost trying to return to a more conservative, prudish mindset towards non-monogamous sex. So those are the main factors that affected that period between 1955 and 1974. 1955 and 1974. Now I'm going to move on to the factors that have affected change in many of the dating rituals between men and women between 1996 and 2015. 1996 and 2015. Number one, online dating became a thing, starting with the mid to late 90s. Online dating became a thing. Well, number one, first and foremost, the internet became a thing, starting with around somewhere between 1995 and 1997. That's when the internet first became a thing. And then more specifically, online dating. The first online dating I remember using was it was through this email platform called AOL, America Online. They had a thing called Love at AOL. First time I ever used that was in either late 1997 or early 1998 when I was living in California. I used Love at AOL a handful of times. Yeah. That was the first, at least from my memory, that was the first real popular online dating app, was Love at AOL. And then a little later came Match.com. Match.com came a little later. Number two was because of the internet, men and women began connecting with members of the opposite sex globally, like from other cities, other states, other countries, mainly because the internet made it possible. So before the internet, you didn't have too many people other than men that might have served in the armed services or who were really wealthy. You didn't have too many men connecting with women from other countries. It existed, but it wasn't prevalent. It existed, but it wasn't prevalent. When it first became prevalent for men to connect with women from other countries was starting with the mid to late 90s. That's when I first started having friends and fraternity brothers of mine talking about traveling to places like the Dominican Republic to hook up with women, Rio de Janeiro to hook up with women, and a few other spots. For me, it was starting with the mid to late 1990s. Yeah. Before the mid to late 90s, the only guys I knew who hooked up with women from other countries before the mid 90s was men who served in various ranks of the armed services, either Army, Marines, Air Force, Navy, Coast Guard. Yeah, armed services guys. Armed services guys for years have been hooking up with women from other countries. But as far as guys who didn't serve in the armed services, no, that didn't become a thing. What's now known as passport bros, guys who travel, that didn't really become a thing until about the mid to late 90s for guys who didn't serve in the armed services. Yeah. So, traveling, hooking up with, not just for men though, even women. Starting with the early to mid 2000s, women start traveling to other countries. Like I know one destination for women has been Italy. There's a lot of women, particularly black women, who travel to Italy to hook up with men. So it's not just men who travel to hook up with women. There's a percentage of women who travel to hook up with men. And that started roughly in the early to mid 2000s. Third thing, and technically I already mentioned this, accusations and charges of sexual harassment in the workplace and the concept of date rape, also known as rape by a friend or social acquaintance, became far more prevalent than ever before. Yeah, man, I've talked about this dozens and dozens and dozens of times. Yeah, for you young guys, you probably realize from listening to me, but see, back in the day, man, there were at least two things that were not considered date rape that are now considered date rape. Number one, if you gave a woman drugs and or alcohol and then proceeded to have sex with her, back in the day, that was considered unethical, but it wasn't considered illegal. Yeah, starting with the 60s all the way up until roughly the mid 80s, I say like 85, 86, 87, you could get a woman drunk or get a woman high and have sex with her without risking going to jail or prison. Again, that was considered unethical, but it wasn't considered illegal. Nowadays, that's illegal. You cannot get a woman drunk and fuck her, or get a woman high on cocaine or something and then fuck her. That's now considered date rape. Another thing that's more considered date rape now than it was before is just generally being real physically aggressive with women. Back in the day, a lot of guys used to be real physically aggressive with women. And again, it was considered unethical. And you might risk a woman's big brother or father coming to find you to whoop your ass, one of her male cousins. Like if you just was at a party and you just aggressively grabbed a woman's ass or grabbed a woman's tits, that was considered unethical. You might get beat up by a male relative of that woman, but you weren't going to go to jail or prison. In today's society, you can go to jail or prison because of that. Yeah, if you're at a party and you say you just randomly and aggressively grabbed a woman's tits or grabbed a woman's ass, that's sexual assault. Yeah, that's considered sexual assault now. And you'll go to jail or go to prison because of that. So a lot of things have changed, man. Compared to again, the 1960s through roughly the mid 80s, things have changed. More related to me specifically, the appeal of pickup artists and dating coaches became more popular and their advice became more sought after by single heterosexual men than ever before. Yeah. Back in the 1970s, and I want to say pretty much most of the 1980s, you never heard guys talking about PUAs or dating coaches. That was not a thing. Yeah, you never heard guys saying, "Hey man, I need to get a book by a pickup artist, or I need to buy this, book by this dating coach." That was pretty much non-existent. Yeah, the 1960s, 1970s, 1980s. I would even possibly say even the early to mid 90s. For the most part, that was non-existent. PUAs, the first time I started hearing the term pickup artist fairly frequently was during the mid to late 90s. Yeah, the first major guy I heard of that was classified as a pickup artist was Ross Jeffries. Yeah, Ross Jeffries was the first major guy I heard about that was classified as a pickup artist. honestly, I want to say, and I'm not 100% sure on this, I want to say I was the first guy to start using the term dating coach. I would say definitely among black guys, I was the first guy to start using the term dating coach. Other guys had similar titles, but they didn't specifically call themselves. Like David X told me, he never used to call himself a dating coach when he first started giving guys advice. He called himself a seduction guru, is what he called himself. Like Tariq Nasheed, he called himself a game advisor, which is very similar to a dating coach, but still a little different. Yeah, he called himself a game advisor. Even Ron Wills. I remember Ron Wills said on a video years ago, when he first started giving advice to me, he didn't refer to himself as a dating coach. He just referred to himself as a brother with some strong opinions related to dating and relationships in today's dating scene. But he didn't specifically call himself a dating coach. Yeah, I was the first one who started calling myself a dating coach. Yeah. I started calling myself a dating coach in the early 2000s. But anyway, yeah, that's one thing that changed specifically on the male end, was men seeking out the knowledge, wisdom, insight, and advice of pickup artists, dating coaches, and other similar dating and relationship advisors. And then finally, this whole thing known informally as the gender war began to take place. I would say start with the mid to late 2000s. You start having women publicly complaining about men's toxic masculinity and misogyny, and you had men similarly publicly complaining about women's toxic femininity and misandry. Yeah, the first time I started hearing about a lot of gender war related content was around 2008. The first person I called him up, and the first person who told me about was a guy, he's fairly well known in the black manosphere. His name is Alex, and his pseudonym is Don Calypso. Don Calypso. He used to listen to my interviews on Blog Talk Radio. He was the first one, I remember, it was back in 2008. He was the first one who told me about all these gender war discussions that were happening on YouTube. I didn't know about that shit, man. The whole gender war. Women going out of their way to disparage men's behavior, men going out of their way to disparage women's behavior and calling out each other's fuckery. Let's notice their fuckery. And again, the first time I heard about that was 2008. So those are the major things that have contributed to some changes in dating rituals between men and women in both periods. You can arguably say that both periods have had an equal share of profound impact. I would still, maybe because I'm a late baby boomer, I would give us at least a slight lean towards the changes that happened between 1955 and 1974 as being more impactful on society than the changes that happened between 1996 and 2015. But generally speaking, I would say both periods have had definitely effect on how heterosexual men relate to heterosexual women in today's dating scene. And now I'm going to transition into my Patreon exclusive portion, and I'm going to upload my first of 5 installments called Excerpts from ARC's Life. Excerpts from ARC's Life. And the first episode is going to examine my life beginning with my toddler years, like say the age of 4, 5, 6, up until the age of 12 years old. From the age of roughly 4 years old to the age of 12 years old. That's coming up in my Patreon exclusive, for my Patreon exclusive subscribers.